Does my partner have an unhealthy relationship with his or her family?
That's a great question, Coby. But
That
before
is a
we get
good
to that
question.
great question, let's get to a great review here. It says, life-changing. I started listening to this podcast to get some perspective and to hear that there are other women out there who have betrayal trauma. I found so much more from listening. I have more understanding for the addict, more compassion to the addiction, and more serenity within myself. I love the blunt honesty from the hosts, and hearing from Ashlynn and Coby talk to each other in such a loving way gives me so much hope. The advice is so incredible. I can't express enough my gratitude for this podcast. I recommend it to everyone I know that has been affected by betrayal trauma and sexual addiction. Love, love, love.
Well, thank you. Very sweet. And I love that. You come for one thing and you get a whole nother bag of chips. So
Absolutely.
thanks for taking the time to do that review.
Okay. Question. Does your partner have an unhealthy relationship with their family? Ashlynn, could you just kind of maybe talk about how this topic came up and just what happened a little bit?
Sure. Okay. So I'm sure if you ask that question, everyone's hand went up because I think we all have an unhealthy relationship somewhere in our family, right? So for me, Kobe's giving me like, what are you going to say? Yes, I definitely, for me, this started showing up. We started talking about it 2 weeks ago in one of my groups, and it was this week-long discussion of sharing stories, not like, can you believe this? But like, is this what we're talking about? Is this what an unhealthy relationship looks like between, for these girls? Cause I run women's groups. It was their husbands and their husband's mom. So their
So their
mother-in-laws.
mother-in-law. Yeah.
Right. And so they're sharing these stories that were kind of like to someone listening on the outside, it's like ding ding ding, this is super unhealthy and that's not normal. But when you're in it, for instance, Kobe and I, we came into our relationship and there was this unhealthy relationship between Kobe and his mom, which created for his mom and me a really unhealthy relationship as well. Like I didn't get along with her. She didn't like me in the beginning when, Kobe said we're getting married. She just cried and cried. And so I felt really rejected from the get-go of like I'm getting in the way of this relationship of mother and son.
So just to summarize, Ashlynn, the women in your group or women were getting together saying, oh my gosh, like, really trying to figure out, why does my mother-in-law drive me crazy?
Yes.
Why am I having such a hard time with her, with the relationship that she has with my husband? And they started sharing stories and realized, oh my goodness, like this might be what it is. And it sounds like what you guys were hitting on and what you experienced with Coby and his mom is what's called an enmeshed relationship that these men have with their mother. And it's actually quite common for men to have an enmeshed relationship with their mother. And
Now, I have to ask, is that common for our audience, like someone who's dealt with addiction or just in general?
yes, both.
Okay. Okay.
I actually think there's a propensity towards sex addiction if there's enmeshment with your mother.
Oh.
Yeah, I would love, I can't quote any research on that, but having done this for 15 years, you think about it, it's my worth comes from pleasing a woman. My worth comes from, making her happy and getting validation from her. And so you sexualize that, and your worth comes from pleasing a woman. Your worth comes from sex. And so it becomes more intoxicating um, to go and please women that way. And so that's my theory. But it's common if you have enmeshment from your mom. And make no mistake about it. If you have an enmeshed relationship with your mom, what that means is you have an over attachment to your mom. She's too in your business. Her opinion can really guilt trip you. You avoid conflict with her. This is not a loving relationship. Don't confuse the two. Your mom is using you To be blunt, your mom is using you for that, like, and I'm not
Knowingly or unknowingly, Brandon?
probably unknowingly.
Yeah.
And I'm not, Coby, I'm not saying this to rip on your mom in any way. If
Totally, I get that.
it is your mom bawling because you were getting married, the reason she was is because she used you for so long, and she was going to lose something because Ashlynn was wedging in between, right? And so that attachment or that connection is not love, and it's not healthy attachment. And so all of a sudden the in-law comes around, the spouse comes around, and what do you know? They don't want to go along with this unhealthy enmeshed relationship, causes some major friction, some major problems.
Yeah. Okay. So I would I would love to hear more of what it looks like. Because if you're hearing, okay, enmeshment, I could be having this with my mother, or my mother-in-law is definitely, this is happening. Or maybe I have plenty of friends who said they were women enmeshed with their dad. And
Yes.
so it's not like it's one way or another,
And
right?
women
But
enmeshed with their moms happens, and all the
it
ways.
goes all the ways.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear more examples of what that really can look like and feel like, and maybe even sound like, whether it's our own experience. I know you have your own. I have a couple. Well, one of the girls in the group was sharing an example. Her mother-in-law frequently comes over to their home and cleans and cooks.
Oh, that's a good one.
And
Yes.
this wife has said, hey, like, I appreciate what you're doing, but this is my home. Like, I feel uncomfortable with you doing this. And they still do it. So it's like, I'm trying to set a boundary, and then they don't do it. And what she's found is her spouse doesn't have her back. He has his mom's back.
Yeah. And when she has a boundary with mother-in-law, if there's an enmeshed relationship there, then spouse, husband will get really, really uncomfortable if she's saying, hey, mother-in-law, I don't want you to come cook and clean at our house. Thank you, but no thank you. He's going to be like, oh my gosh, and then side with his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Simple definition of enmeshment is lack of boundaries. And so, it's things like, it can be so subtle and simple. Like, let's say as a couple, you don't want to go to mom and dad's house for Sunday dinner, but you're worried that mom's going to freak out if you don't go. And so your spouse kind of goes anyways and guilt trips you into going. Like, that seems so small, right? But what it's showing is that he can't stand in his truth and live in his truth. The fear of the wrath of his mom is greater than him standing in his truth.
Which sounds crazy. Like, I'm sure, Coby, you're listening going, oh my gosh, like, no, I didn't feel that, but you probably did.
This is like a super interesting conversation, because I've known for a long time that my mom and I had an enmeshed relationship. And I'll give you some examples. When I was young, I remember my dad just worked a lot, was out of town once a week overnight. And I remember my mom would work really hard at cleaning the house, along with, caring for 7 kids and keeping kids with special needs in the house. I mean, she was the quintessential one-armed wallpaper hanger who was just always going. And I remember my one night, my dad came home, and there was always this big welcoming committee with all the littles. All of us kids would run over to see dad and hug him, and oh my gosh, so good. And mom was just like relieved, like, oh shoot, finally I get some help. And because he'd go home like 6-7 o'clock at night, and then he'd change his clothes. And I remember my mom saying to me, Coby, no, this precedes it. She would like clean, like mop and sweep the floor. And she did it one night, and my dad came in and didn't say anything about it. And then he went upstairs to change, and she said, Coby, I just like worked really hard at cleaning the floor, and your dad never noticed. So when you're married, you better notice when your wife vacuums the floor. You better notice when she sweeps and mops the floor or cleans the bathroom. or makes dinner and say thank you. And so looking back, I was just like, okay, Mom, that's just what I do. So
Mhm. He
do
does
I,
a great job
yeah,
at it.
I still like, that's just in me to do that. But looking back, what I realized is that my mom was needing verbal affirmation that she was good enough, and she was earning that in her own way, right? Earning that by cleaning the house, caring for the kids, and then waiting for my dad to make an observation about that, which
So
he
the
never did.
But the enmeshed part of that was your mom
She's
saying,
using me.
yes, your mom saying clean the house that's a good thing. Yeah, clean the
Yeah.
house, Kobe. That's a great thing. Your mom using you to vent,
Mhm.
Yes.
using rather than dealing with it with her husband. And
she was coming to me.
She was going to you, and she was relying upon you. And what, Kobe, what did that do to you?
Brannon, I didn't know. I'll tell you exactly what it did with me. Is it developed this disdain for my dad,
Interesting.
where I would see
You
the
took
things
on
that
her
he
stuff.
didn't do. Yeah, I totally took on my mom's stuff because the relationship was so enmeshed with my mom. Again, I grew up in Washington, Spokane, Washington, and I remember those conversations taking place up there. But they followed us to Ogden, Utah, where my parents moved us when I was in high school. And I still remember my dad sitting at the dinner table on Sunday. Everybody's sitting down, and my mom finally puts all the food on the table. My dad sits down at the end of the table, at the head of the table, and he has both of my youngest siblings on either side of him, who are probably like 2 and 4 at the time. And and my mom says, "Well, Craig, you can ask someone to say the prayer." Oh yeah. Okay. So let's ask a blessing on the food. So he'd take care of that, and then immediately he would grab a piece of meat from the plate in front of him, put it on his own plate, and then he'd start like cutting the meat and like just eating. Meanwhile, the 2 and 4-year-old are on either side of him, and they don't have anything on their plates.
And he's just eating.
And
away.
he's just eating, exactly. Yeah. And I remember as a teenager, and that's probably like 10th grade, I was probably like 14, 15 or something, just looking at him with the same disdain that my mom had. Yeah, which is like, what the hell's wrong with you, dude? Like feed your kids that are next to you. Like wake up, be present. And so that developed a disdain for my dad that lasted for many, many, many years, just a resentment. Like,
but you guys you and your mom were bonded in that resentment.
Yes.
Well, and the interesting thing that happened was, she's passed on, and now I feel like, oh, I just didn't understand her, and she didn't understand me, and I think we get each other now.
Right.
And I definitely know she's a part of our lives in a good way. But for us, I remember right before we moved back to Utah, I remember being like, dang, she calls you all the time. Mm-hmm. And Coby would tell her all the things, every fight we had, or this and mm-hmm. Ash. And so it's almost like
we became like confidants in each other.
But they would commiserate their
they're
partners.
Doing it to you. Yeah, yes. They're doing it to you.
Yeah.
So I really had I wasn't set up to be this like, come and embrace my wife.
Right.
Because and I remember saying that, like, they only hear the bad things about me. They don't ever hear the good about me. And so, and then I was showing up in betrayal trauma. So they really only saw that I was the worst.
Mean, horrible Ashlynn.
Totally.
Yes.
So I learned from that, like many things, right? But I appreciate you saying that, Ashlynn, because I actually really never connected those dots. But what you said is entirely accurate. And I really would, like, my mom was like my close friend, mm-hmm. commiserate with her. And, but so my mom would be like, mom, but like friend.
Yeah.
But more mom than friend. And so it was a total disaster how we interacted. And so, and the more time that went on, and Ashlynn and I had, more fights, the more I would be like, Mom, like, I don't even, like, here it is again. So it wasn't fair in any way, Ashlynn, to you, because because of the enmeshed relationship I have with my mom, it was never modeled to me how to constructively have conversation. I never observed constructive conversation between partners.
Right.
Okay. I saw logistical efforts and
mm-hmm.
coordination, but I didn't see how conflict was to be handled. And I didn't see how one would ask for what they needed and another one would sit and listen and see the reason and accommodate.
You learned coordinated resentment. Right.
That's awesome.
This is how you resent. This is, you and you know what? Your mom probably loved that you would go to her and vent.
Oh yeah.
Ashlynn. That probably felt really good to her, right?
Well, and I remember had no idea what enmeshment was. And so I couldn't put into words what I was feeling. I also didn't know how to use a feeling wheel back then. But I was just mad, or like, your mom is just, she's so mean to me, Coby. Why don't you notice how, when she says these mean things,
Passive
and,
aggressive comments and the like.
and he would just be like,
What are you
you're
talking about?
crazy, Ashlynn. And like, my mom is not like that. And I'd be
Yeah.
going, am I crazy? Like, I swear she was said this thing and it was very rude.
And of course, I became very adept at defending my mom, right, Brandon? Because it's like
Automatically. But here's the thing. So I actually have, I think I have an incredibly healthy relationship with my mom. Like, our boundaries are really good. She actually hardly ever calls me, and I don't call her, but we love each other a ton, and like, really good, healthy relationship with my mom. But my family system overall was enmeshed, and we were all supposed to think a certain way. We were all supposed to do a certain thing. We'd gossip. We'd talk behind in-laws' backs a lot. All that stuff would happen. And from my experience being raised in an enmeshed family, when the in-laws or my wife would come into the system, it wasn't that, what they would reflect back was true. It was that they were wrong. They were broken. We were right. Like, I didn't realize I was even in this system. I was so a part of it. And it took me a little while to become conscious and aware of,
same.
oh, wow. Like, I just would automatically operate within that system. And luckily I caught on fairly quickly after I got married, but my wife would be like, saying some things. I'd be like, what? Like, huh?
What are you talking about?
Yeah. That's how it was for you, Coby?
It was exactly how it was. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, my mom and I are good. Like, she's my mom. Of course, she's supposed to help me. And Ashlynn would always, sling the scripture at me from like the Old Testament, like, cling unto your wife.
Let your parents go.
And none else. And it was like, well, screw you, because they're not mean to me like you are. And so I'm going to go.
She said, Coby, the nursing is over.
Right? Stop it, Coby.
Stop it.
Yeah, exactly. But it really was for many, many years, this really hard conversation that would bubble up. And this isn't fair at all. Not super fair, but this is totally not fair to Ashlynn. But we spent a lot of time. We were living about 5 hours from my family. And the first number of years, probably first 5, 6, 7 years, we would go to my family's house a lot. Probably a couple times a month, and stay for the weekend. And it was just like repeated. That is a lot. It is a lot.
Driving that far, that is a lot.
Totally. So it was just like this continual exercise of maintaining enmeshment while throwing Ashlynn under the bus. Not intentionally, of course. No. It was just like, this is, like you said, that was our family system. That was how our family operated.
Well,
right?
And here's how I felt in that. So one, I had betrayal trauma because we were already dealing with the secrets and the lying, okay? But I felt really needy. And so when I would say, hey, I need you, if we're going to go spend time with your family, can you like be a part of me? Like, I don't want to be left alone in the room because they say things that make me feel really uncomfortable or whatever.
Right.
I was young. We didn't really know how to function great. Right. But Coby, that's taken even time for us to figure out of how to show up for each other as partners, in that dynamic with family or with friends or whatever. But I felt crazy. I felt alone. I felt needy. I felt like a jerk, why I was being really judgmental of their relationship. His sweet mom never got to know me.
Yeah.
Because from the get-go, I don't feel like who I really am. And she passed away before Coby was able to, come
even remotely close to healthy.
Really?
Like,
so she definitely knew about Coby's, some of what was going on, and she would try to support him in that, but she never even got to see where, Coby is today.
Right. When he's, there's a book by Ken Adams. I think it's called When He's Married to Mom, which is a good title. So when he is married to mom, let's kind of talk about that. You said, Ashlynn, you felt like a jerk. You felt like, what is the feeling as a spouse when there's this over attachment to mom? You feel like you don't have a voice. You feel
Mhm.
unseen. You feel like you are a jerk, and that they're acting as if you are a jerk, and like,
Well, and here's this narrative that I still have is like, you're not choosing me. Like you
yeah,
chose me when we got married, but you don't choose me.
yes,
That's what
you
it felt like.
you choose to placate mom and to make her happy and to turn
Mhm.
toward her and to tell her how you're feeling over me, over connecting and attaching to me. Now I see the other thing, the other way around happens sometimes, where the spouse will wedge between a close relationship with a mom, to try to have them prove their love. Like, I want you to push your mom really, 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 really far away to show me how much you love me. And
Mm.
that's not healthy either, right? Um, Healthy boundaries is what needs to happen, where you're boundaried with your mom and you're honest and you're connected to your spouse at the same time. So,
It's interesting because one of the gals in the same group we talked today, and she said, "Okay, we're trying to be boundaried as a couple this time, not just her." And
right.
so they say, "Hey, this doesn't work. This is our home. No more cleaning. No more coming and cooking."
Yes.
And it's still happening. And I told her, "Okay, well, think about it. She's this adult woman who's never been told, no, this
Right.
doesn't work for me. So it's
Right.
going to take some practice." And so I said, the more that you can show up as a partnership in this boundary, the better it's going to go. She's going to push back because it's like, what are you doing? And you're coming between me and my son. This doesn't work, right?
If boundaries tear apart the enmeshed relationship, that relationship will change and it will be affected. There's no way around it. And chances are, the partner who wants to be enmeshed, but now there's boundaries there, they'll start to get angry. They'll start to get
Mm.
manipulative. They'll start to push. It's interesting. They've talked about, hey, don't come clean our house, but she's still cleaning the house. They need to actually have a boundary. And
Mhm.
they're still at that point where actually having a boundary is so scary, because when they actually do say, I'm sorry, but you need to put the dustpan away. And if you don't, then we're going to have to ask you to leave. Right. That's uncomfortable. That right there is like,
Yeah,
ah,
no one wants to do that.
and they probably know that she'll freak out, but they need to start letting her freak out a little bit so that they can maintain their space and their safety together as a couple. So having
Okay, so
boundaries is not easy.
no, it's not easy. And it's, yeah. Okay. So, Brandon, let's say I'm listening to this episode and maybe I'm realizing I have some sort of enmeshed relationship going on.
Mm-hmm.
My eyes are open, or maybe my partner, I'm seeing it in my partner. Now what?
Okay, if you're seeing it in your partner, go to them and tell them how unhealthy they are and how they need to change everything.
That will go super well.
I'm just kidding.
They'll just stop and sing praises to your name and hug you.
Thank
Why
you
did
for
you?
telling me.
Yes, I
Oh,
have
that
no
makes me so
idea. I want to do
happy.
this right away. For
Yeah,
sure. I
yeah.
want to choose you.
So really, if you're seeing this in yourself, I hate to tell you this, but it could be one of the hardest things you ever do, to shift from. So let me explain one thing really quickly. A family system, when it comes to cohesion, there's a continuum, and on one side of the continuum is independence, it's disconnection. On the other extreme is enmeshment.
Mhm.
So in between is, there's connection and there's separation. So you have some connection, but you're also yourself and you're separated. That equilibrium of connection and separation is the healthy place. So if you're trying to go from enmeshment to just healthy connection with a little bit of separation, it's going to be excruciatingly hard. And I hate to say that. I wish I could say it's easy. But you have been controlled and manipulated into this system your entire life. It's been set up so that you become this thing. Your parent has in some ways been narcissistic, and they have used you if you're in an enmeshed system. They've used you for their own benefit. When you become an adult, you realize, you know what? I'm done being used. And oh, by the way, my spouse doesn't want me to be used and either. And they're kind of reflecting that back. And you say to your parent, your very own parent who's conditioned you into this system, you say, no more. I'm done with that. That doesn't work for me. It's really, really, really uncomfortable. But the more you do it, the more you realize you're not going to die. You can do that. You can be separated from your family system and still be worthy of love at the same time. In fact, you can actually create real love if you're able to have those boundaries. So when I say excruciating, it's going to take some courage. It's going to take some strength. And I'd say get some support from other people that love you, who know what's healthy and can say, yeah, step into this. Have these boundaries with your mom. Come Thanksgiving, do this instead of what you'd normally do. What's your truth? Own that truth with her. Follow through with that truth and live that truth with her. It's going to be hard, but you can do this. And as you do it, your relationship with your mom's going to change. And it might feel like it's getting worse before it starts to get better.
That's likely how it will go down. And what's interesting about our situation is my mom passed before we could even get to that.
Mm-hmm.
Before we could even get to that. And we did establish some boundaries with her prior to her death, like the months leading up to it, in very preliminary ways. But looking back, what I realize is that there was so much of my identity wrapped up in my mom and how she thought I was, what she thought of me. Mm. And there was a lot of identity that my mom had of herself based upon my interactions with her. Totally unhealthy. But it was like I couldn't fully function on my own without my mom. And that's not how, I mean, it's like my mom's not going to go into the testing center and take a test with me. She's not going to like sit down and, I'll be allowed to do that. But excuse me, I need to get to the point where I can study my own self and take my own test without mom. And that's just an analogy of like, I couldn't deal with conflict without involving my mom. I couldn't and didn't understand how to do that on my own because my mom was so involved in that. And what happened upon her passing is something that is unique to us in that way because we didn't have to have that conversation. But what I will say is just because my mom had passed doesn't mean that Ashlynn and I built these, doesn't mean that Ashlynn all of a sudden had this trust that really existed with my mom before. I had to actively choose Ashlynn. I had to learn to choose you. And even after she passed, Ashlynn, I know it took years, and I mourn the fact that that's where it was, because the price that I had to pay was not having full trust and safety with Ashlynn, or even no, I mean, full trust and safety. I didn't have trust and safety in that specific way with you because my mom was in between us.
Well, and I think
that wasn't fair to you.
Well, and I didn't understand back then how to express what it was feeling like,
what
right?
was going on.
And so when we know better, we do better, and we have done better. But
so I feel bad for the people who have to have these conversations with their family members, whether they're mom or dad or whatever the case is, because I'm just thinking, like, how hard would that be with my mom? And it would be really, really
we've
hard.
We've done a little bit with more my family dynamic. And for me, just a big part of it was a huge, huge shift in our relationship when Coby had my back with both our families.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoyed a trip to his family parties or family events because I now know he's got my back. I know that when I say, hey, I'm ready to go, he's like, we're on it. Like, whatever works for us as a partnership, he's got my back like I have his. And
doesn't that feel good?
Yes.
It totally does.
It was really hard for me to explain to him, like, I wasn't getting that. I knew that when I would go there, I would feel more alone and really disconnected. And when we would leave, I would feel, I'm triggered and I don't know why. So it was a big deal. And even more recently with my own family,
Yeah.
Coby stood up for me when I was attacked, and that's never happened in the 21 years we've been together. And, it was like, you go deal with your own family,
Right.
but it was a big deal for my partner to say, hey, that's not okay.
Absolutely. I love it, Coby. You're the man, Coby.
It took a really long time to get to that place, and I really regret that I mean, that me setting up for you with your family only has recently taken place, and that's one of those big regrets that I have. And yet at the same time, what I do know is I know now what it feels like to have your back and to say, I've got you, like I'm here with you, I'm by your side with my family or with yours. And when that brought a different dynamic to our relationship, when I finally could say, all right, I know that I've been wonky with your family and with my family, but I'm going to show up now.
Mm-hmm.
It was just this really strange, but really wonderful and sweet evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't this huge evolution, but it was profound.
But
really.
it made a giant impact on our
Trust.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yes, the trust and safety
Yeah.
that I had been lacking for so many years, really like 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
has found like footing.
The level of enmeshment kind of dictates the level of space and separation that you need. So let me explain.
Okay.
If I'm extremely enmeshed with my mom, like extremely, that means I might really need some space from her. I might really need some separation. And not out of spite or anything like that, but she might really, really, really try to keep cleaning my house, to keep telling me what to do in my marriage, to keep guilt tripping me all the time. And I might get to a point where I say, Mom, our relationship is only going to happen when I call you. Other than that, please don't call me. Now, that seems harsh. That seems like you're doing what you're not supposed to, separating from your family. You're not doing that out of anger and fear. You're doing that out of love. Love for myself. I need to have some boundaries. And because we're so enmeshed, I need more space.
Yeah.
Um,
And that sounds so, well, I know because I'm doing it. It's so hard. It's so uncomfortable. But for me, I do need that space to find clarity and to
Yes.
find really where my heart is and not where my emotions are being like dictating the show.
Absolutely. Okay. Question for you guys. Can you love your spouse, like really support them and love your enmeshed parent at the same time?
Oh yeah. As long
So-
as you're boundaried, you can.
Okay. So
Like there's more love for me because there's less resentment. There's less resentment with Ashlynn and I if I can in a boundaried way with my enmeshed parents say, actually we're not going to come for this holiday event, or we won't be coming for this Sunday dinner, and we'll
sounds
let
like you're
you know.
punishing them. Are you loving them, Coby?
Yeah. And again, because when I can create distance, healthy distance in between, healthy dance space in between my parents and I, that removes that layer of resentment that exists with Ashlynn
But
and
Coby, they might say, but that's not how we do love in our family. Like you don't
And-
have space. You don't have this boundary. Like you're not coming for Thanksgiving. Like you piece of crap son.
Which
Yes. Let me respond to that though in real time, just as an example. Mom and Dad, I know that this is new. I know that we've never done this before, but this is going to be the best scenario for me and for my family to not come.
Fine.
We
Don't come.
love you.
You know what?
Okay.
Don't ever come.
I know that's going to be upsetting, Mom,
Okay.
and I'm okay with that being upsetting. And it's not out of hurting you. It's not out of like trying to spite you, but it's important that you know that from here on out, we have to do our own thing.
Love it.
Well, and we started with little things like we stopped staying at his parents' house and we started getting a hotel.
Good.
And that was a big problem. Like, why would you do that? You have a free room right
All
here.
right.
But that gave us space. And that was
Yes.
so healthy to be able to say it, after dinner, we're going to the hotel.
Right.
We're going to go and do our thing. And it was healthier for all of us in the end, but it was deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just want to really, really drive home. It's not with enmeshment, and it creates this your spouse versus them, or your spouse. And if you fall into that trap, then you start to play those games. And you can absolutely love your mom and your spouse at the same time, even if your mom's extremely unboundaried and unhealthy. You have compassion for why she's that way, but have boundaries with her at the same time, and love her for who she is, but have boundaries with her at the same time. And it's not your spouse versus your mom. Now, your mom might come back and say, well, you're just choosing her over me, or vice versa. Love them both. Be boundaried with the enmeshed parent, though.
So I'm going to love you as my mom, and I'm going to love my partner as my partner. Those are different types of love.
We're going to have
different types of relationships. Yes.
Well,
1,000%. That's don't be afraid either. If you're going to exert some boundaries, don't be afraid to just repeat yourself and in a calm way.
Oh, broken record it.
Yes. Yeah. Broken record it. Just like, no, mom, I just want to restate this. Like, I love you. And I'm also
you
going
don't
to
love
do
me. If you love me, you'd come.
on my own.
No, you don't love me.
Mom, my love doesn't start and stop with your turkey and your stuffing. My love spans far beyond a meal, but I'm going to do me. And I'm going to ask that you respect the fact that I'm going to do us. And we can get together another time. But really, this is about our family creating what's ours.
Right.
That's not easy. And I know that I don't have to say that to my mom because she's passed on. Heaven rest her soul. Mom, I love you. But I know that my mom would get over that. I know she would learn to accept it, and she would be okay with it.
When we started,
Yeah.
My guess is she's listening now, and she's grateful that you are the man who you are, Coby, and that like she would want you to have boundaries with her.
Well, and that's the thing is, I think any parent, when they zoom out, is going to want you to be successful in your relationship.
Yes.
And so if you're being boundaried to create a successful relationship, if they can like sit in that, they're going to be like, oh, this makes sense. I need to be in my relationship, not yours.
Right.
Very true. Very true.
This was good. I hope it helped maybe open some eyes into maybe what's going on that didn't make sense before.
It's perfect time for us to have this discussion. We just finished Thanksgiving. Christmas is right around the corner. You're hanging out with houses with each other. Hopefully not getting COVID together.
Hopefully.
But a good opportunity to practice some good talks and good boundaries and just go do this stuff. So it works if you work it.
Yes.
It works if you work it. Guys, thanks for being here. If you haven't yet, pop over to iTunes, leave us a review and rate us. Love to have you give us some feedback there.
Thank you.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
guys.